So the construction on this building was started in 1785. So it's actually the last example of 18th century architecture in Queens. There are older houses, but this is the last one from the 1700s. And it was created to house Joseph King, a British immigrant who was a sea captain who came over to America. His wife was the daughter of...
They married into the Murray family, and if
Murrays.
you know the Murrays of the Murray Hill in Manhattan, and also Murray Hill here in Flushing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was as anywhere, like sort of a marriage between multiple very prominent merchant families. They weren't to the point of like industrial rich, but they were still considered sort of upper middle class. As you can tell from the size of this house, they're not in comparison with King Manor. He was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Thank you.
These are all the prominent names in that settled Queens. The King family, Murray, Morris. What always strikes me about this house is that there are still many, many homes that look exactly like this. The Flushing stayed very, very pure for a long, long time. All this recent development that you see is in fact very recent. These styles you can walk into, and what's very unusual about this house is for its time is the height. A lot of the homes, if you go like the restoration villages, they always seem very small.
True. That's it, yes.
But this
Absolutely.
house was probably considered just a very big, spacious house for its time. To walk in to see that height of the ceiling.
And here, and even upstairs, the height of the ceiling.
Still up here, yeah. It feels very modern for a house this old.
Moving from the house itself, because we're going to go back to the actual King family and what they've done in the past, to a very, well, I guess a temporary exhibition that was installed a little before COVID started, sometime for a few groups, and one of the groups was called the Flushing Garden Club, to establish public open spaces, green spaces for general public to enjoy. And they became very prominent, as you'll see on this video, from our collection in 1939 World's Fair, where they actually had a huge pavilion dedicated to the Flushing Garden Club, highlighting the green spaces and the history of the nurseries in Flushing. I sometimes feel pretty sad when I see that all of this was displayed, as you'll see in the video. You'll see some of the different flowers, and this is all originated by the pioneer women of Flushing.
The Flushing Garden Club was really started to try and encourage a sense of horticultural science and get people and encourage people to start gardens of their own. When it was started, it was really focused on teaching people how to cultivate their areas, and kind of culminates in them being featured at the World's Fair, where you can see all of the effort that they put into designing all of these flower beds. You can see how vibrant these flowers are. Keep in mind, this is 1939-40s World Fair, so this is actually original color film. It hasn't been colorized after the fact. This is around the same time as Wizard of Oz, so the technology was there. One of the members of the garden club has made various different maps. This map is what they remember of their childhood growing up in Flushing, the horticultural landscape. You can see where they've marked various different gardens on here. And then I think this map is probably the most fascinating in this case, because it shows you which names own which plots of land, and you'll see a lot of
wow, that's cool.
repeats, like the Parsons, the Murrays, the Bounds. A lot of these are actually nurseries that are growing various different decorative trees.
He made this.
You made that?
I made that arrangement.
Oh my God.
So this is a parlor note. These would have been objet d'art, just display pieces that would give visitors to your house something to look at. A lot of times these would have been pressed flowers, dried flowers, silk flowers. Sometimes they'd be mechanical objects. Just to highlight a specific object in this case, this floral scrapbook is a good example of amateur botany and amateur naturalism. This was a concept that was very popular in the Victorian era, that someone could show their mastery over the nature around them by documenting it and showing, that they are learned in the science. They would collect samples of various flora and sometimes fauna, especially ocean life, and they would press them in books and preserve them, because the book would desiccate the sample, and then they could mount it. And they would typically write information about what plant it was, where they collected the sample, and when they collected the sample, and they create these scrapbooks. I'm not sure if this was a garden club member. I'd have to look into that, but the kind of people would be generally upper middle class people who had time on their hands to go out on outing, go for long walks, to to collect samples. It was also about being out in nature.
So it wouldn't be necessarily plants around their particular homes. This would just be an ongoing hobby of
Yeah.
collecting samples.
People would collect samples around their area,
Okay.
but also would do so when they went on vacation.
I love that
And this
idea.
piece down here?
The vase itself
50s
is,
are or
it's actually a trophy.
it's a trophy.
Yes.
That's a beautiful
I
trophy.
don't remember what the trophy is for, but that is merely aesthetic, which is why it's not signed.
It's gorgeous.
But
Yeah.
the two books that we have here are World's Fair scrapbooks. They're open to the page about Gardens on Parade.
Oh,
These
beautiful.
scrapbooks would have been sold to you blank. It was up to the person who bought them to fill it with the memories of their experience. They'd paste in tickets or other ephemera, and they'd fill these scrapbooks up. We actually have two different scrapbooks from the Davenport Public Library. You can see them talk about the Gardens on Parade. So we keep this Victorian room styled after the 1850s. Actually closer to the later 1850s. This would have been a few years after one of the Murray children had died in the Civil War. This would have been very typical of a upper middle class family, but this is around the time when the family's finances would have started to decline slowly. As Flushing started growing, they actually eventually ended up speculating on some news that the 7 line was going to be extended into Murray Hill, which is about 10 blocks that way. Being that the house was kind of in the way of construction, they actually had to move the house so it would be out of the way of construction. They also speculated on some real estate, so they purchased an apartment building thinking that they'd be able to sell it to commuters. However, as we know now, the 7 line was not extended, and so the Murrays actually ended up losing a lot of money from that deal. I should also point out that a parlor like this would never be on the 2nd floor. We have it up here because the first floor is used for exhibit space.
These are the grounds. I feel like I've stepped back in time. There is this beautiful, well, actually 2 trees, 2 weeping beech trees that are just absolutely gorgeous. And they are the descendants of the original tree. And we will show you the stump of that tree. It died, and I hear they had a ceremony for it, the Parks Department, because it was so historical, so beautiful. So these are 2 trees that form this beautiful canopy. The grounds here, they will be transformed, and there's a project going on to bring this garden back to life. It is beautiful, but it will be worked on and restored. An art project in the making. This is a wonderful place. I suggest you come and visit it. If you're hearing this before the end of October, there will be a fundraising event for Italian Heritage Month. It's going to be on the 25th of October. All proceeds for tickets go to fund the museum. It's a wonderful place. We'll be back. And if you see this afterwards, I hope you come and visit the museum, and I hope you enjoy this tour of the museum to give you a little glimpse into this gem in downtown Flushing, Queens, New York. Have a great day. Take care.